Hey everybody, it is Rosa, and today I'm going to finally do the part 2 of Worst Anime Parents. Now, just like before, there are going to be some spoilers, but I am going to go ahead and give a quick heads up that out of all of them, number 1 is definitely the worst one, and if you guys are uncomfortable with it, you guys don't have to go all the way up. And if you guys have any suggestions for future videos, then I'll see what I can do. So without further ado, here we go. Coming in at number 10 is Daigo Kagemitsu from Dororo. He was the father of main character Hakimaru and the other main character Tahomaru. And he is here because during the birth of his first son, he had lost faith in God and decided to go to this temple where there were demons. It's here that he tells the demons that anything that's his, they can have it, just as long as they bless his land, so that life would be easy and he could provide a future for the child that he was having. Unfortunately, this resulted with his son being devoured partially by demons, leaving him as nothing more but a head and torso, with no skin, no eyes, nose, like nothing at all. Now, one of the reasons why I put him very, very low at number 10 is due to the fact that a lot of people say that he was a terrible dad for doing this to his son, but in reality, Daigo actually had no way of knowing that the demons were going to do this. He didn't tell the demons, "Take my child and bless my lamb." He simply said anything that was his. So therefore, in truth, he had no way of knowing that that was going to happen. But when he realized it happened, he in the end decided to go ahead and accept this, knowing full well that this child wasn't going to survive. His only option was to instead create this future for another child. Now, as a father, he was actually quite good to Tahomaru, and as a result, he looked up to his father. The downside was that when Daigo's actions were revealed, he tried to force his younger son to understand the justifications for his actions. And to an extent, I do understand, considering before he was born, they lived in a land that wasn't going to survive for much longer. But it really is sad knowing that he, in the end, led his second son down a dark fate. And in the end, he could never bring himself to see Hakimaru as his son, even telling him that if he had known this was all going to happen, where Hakirimaru started taking his body parts back, thus robbing his father of the riches that the demons had given him, he straight up says that he would have killed him himself rather than leaving him in the hands of the midwife who was supposed to kill him. At number 9, we have the boss from Karas. He was the father of main character Otaha. From his early childhood, he raised Otaha to basically be nothing more but a weapon, forcing him to kill people and constantly treating and referring to him as a monster. Now, one of the things about Otaha was that he was born with a condition that made it to where he was incapable of feeling pain, and as a result, he was often referred to as a monster who had never known fear. For a very long time, he didn't really seem to fully care about Otaha because when word got out that Otaha and his friend were planning to leave that area for a better life, he straight up sent his men to go and try and kill him. During the time when he was led to believe that Otaha was dead, he continued torturing Otaha's friend. Now, when he finally finds out that he's alive, he decides to confront him, calling him, once again, a monster, and ridiculing him for always being seen as one. However, Otaha responds by acknowledging that, so far, he was the only one that had ever seen him as a monster. I think the most messed up part was that in their final moments, he straight up tells him that had he had known that things were going to turn out this way, he would have flushed him down the toilet. Now, one of the reasons why I put him on this list was due to the fact that he was also Otaha's older brother. Creepy. Number 8 is Morgan Le Fay from Fate Apocrypha. She was the mother of Saber Red Mordred. Now, one of the reasons why she's here is because, well, some people have children for the joys of having children. She had a child simply to ruin another person's life. She raised Mordred to always focus on one day finding a way to be by Arthur's side, and when he became a knight, she eventually would reveal to Mordred that Arthur was also his father. but when Mordred confronted him, it didn't go so well. I feel as though she had planned this knowing full well that Arthur would not acknowledge Mordred, which would only encourage Mordred's desire to ruin Arthur's life, which was more than likely something that she had planned. It's really upsetting knowing that her selfish desire and why she had Mordred resulted with Mordred being killed by the very father he spent his whole life wanting to be acknowledged by. It also sucks considering the fact that Mordred is my favorite character from the series. At number 7 is Okimasa from Kogetsujo no Kabaneri. He was the father of Biba. Now, in the past, it shows that he was once a very good, nurturing father. But considering the fact that they lived in a world where there were these vampire zombie creatures, he over time began to grow more and more paranoid, fearing that one day the Kabane would come and get him. At one point, this resulted with him having a night terror and slashing his son on the back when he was still just a kid. Now, at first, I didn't see anything wrong with that. What am I saying? Because he had done it unintentionally. However, the reason why he's here is because of what happens years later. Eventually, his paranoia gets so bad that he eventually decides to abandon his son and a few soldiers in this one area, refusing to send them any resources, which eventually resulted with them all dying one by one. However, Biba and a few others did eventually survive, but this resulted with a huge impact on Biba, who grew up with the inability to trust others. And years later, he would come back to get his revenge against his father. It's kind of ironic how he didn't die at the hands of the Kabane, the very things he feared. Instead, he is killed by his own son, the monster he himself had created. Dramatic irony. At number 6, we have Zack's parents from Angels of Death. These two are a very interesting pair. I'm not 100% sure if the guy really was Zack's biological father, only that for reasons unknown, he decided to set Zack on fire while he was still a child at the time. Now, for his mother, rather than taking her son to the hospital, she instead wraps bandages around him and then gives him to an illegal orphanage. She, much like Aries' mom, puts her child in the hands of someone who neglected him so horribly that he had to resort to eating garbage in order to survive. That, and they even went as far as forcing him to bury the dead children because they neglected to feed them. It's kind of ironic how this is one of the reasons why he becomes the way he is. Rather than helping her son like anyone would, she decides not to bother and instead abandons him, while this guy literally sets him on fire for no reason, which results with Zack becoming a very, very interesting character later on in the future. At number 5, we have King Fritz from Attack on Titan. King Fritz was the father of Maria, Rose, and Sheena, who were also the daughters of Ymir, the first Titan to exist. Now, the reason why he's here is because of the fact that to him, his daughters were basically rewards to Ymir for serving him. In reality, I personally believe that the reason why he made Ymir have children with him was because he knew that doing this would give her a further reason to remain loyal to him, because he could easily just dangle them above her as a mere threat. But the real kicker around here is that when Ymir had died in front of her daughters while protecting him, he was so paranoid about the idea of losing the power that he had gained from Ymir that he decided that the best course of action was to force all three daughters to consume their mother's body, even telling them to make sure that not a single piece remained of her, which more than likely traumatized his daughters a lot more than he thinks it did. It truly fascinates me how, on his deathbed, instead of making it clear to his daughters that he loved them, he instead tells them to have children, and when they themselves die, have their children consume their bodies. All this just so he could keep a power that didn't even belong to him in the first place. which also is one of the reasons why Eren and all the other people have to deal with all these things. The creation of the Nine Titans and why it's possible for Eldians to turn into Titans in the first place. So, if anyone can truly pin the blame on who's the real monster, it's definitely this guy. Coming in at number 4 is Mary from Shimatsu no Valkyrie. She was the mother of one of the main characters, Jack the Ripper. And in the beginning, I was actually under the impression that she was a very good mother. Despite being a prostitute, she used all the money that she had in order to buy books to make sure he was well educated. If he got hurt, she would freak out and do everything to make sure he was in good condition. That is, until later on in the story, it's revealed that before she had him, she had had 5 different miscarriages. And this actually leads to one of her friends wondering, why did she abort her 5 other children but not him? It's here that we later learn that a long time ago she met this man who promised her that when his plays became more popular, he would come back and marry her. And when she discovered she was pregnant by him, she chose to keep Jack. So in reality, this woman had a child in order to keep herself tied to a man who would later go on to break his promise and marry another woman. The downside was that when she began to realize that she spent 13 years raising her son for nothing, this causes her to finally let it slip that she never truly loved him. Upon realizing that her whole life was a lie, she straight up tells him that she wasted all of her life and that she wished that she had gotten rid of him the same way she did to his siblings. And the biggest irony is that her son had the ability to see the color of emotions, and he didn't like the color of anger emanating from her. Eventually, he ends up snapping and deciding that he wanted to, and I quote, free her from her pain. It's here that he sees the color of fear for the first time, which he believes is more beautiful than the color of his mother's fake love, which results with him killing her. Now, I'm sure that she probably never planned for this, but I think the biggest irony is that she ends up becoming her son's first victim and sets him on a path of becoming a sadistic murderer who liked the color of fear. Now, before we get to our final 3, let's go ahead and do our final honorable mentions. The first one is Sakuya's parents from Survamp. Just like the title says, they were the mother and father of Sakuya and his older sister. These two were truly horrible parents who cared very little for their children. They coerced their daughter into committing suicide and then forced their son to claim that it was an accident in order to claim some money because they had secretly placed an insurance policy on their daughter. They literally made her commit suicide for money, and the only reason why she went through with it was because they had promised her that they wouldn't harm her brother. And unfortunately, they did not honor this promise because years later they would pressure Sakuya to do the exact same thing. It truly fascinates me how these two cared so little for their children that more than likely they are probably planning to do the exact same thing again, but we never get to see them except for the flashback where we learn about Sakuya's backstory. Like, I truly find it sad that their daughter honestly believed them when they told her that they wouldn't hurt her brother. Like, if they did it once, it was obvious that they were gonna do it again. It was just a matter of time. Now, our final honorable mention is the unnamed gazelle from Beastars. He was the father of main antagonist Melon. Now, I was actually going to put his mother on this list, considering what I learned in later chapters. However, I do have to admit that this spot definitely goes to his father. Melon spent his whole life unaware of what had happened to his father, believing that his mother, who was a leopard, had devoured him. In reality, this good-for-nothing abandoned his lover and child when Melon was still a baby, simply because he couldn't handle the criticism of being in an interspecies relationship, since he was a herbivore and she was a carnivore. I think it's so messed up how when Gosha and Yafia find out that he's Melon's father, Gosha believes that maybe if he were to speak to him, this would help Melon, have a change of heart, only for him to show his lack of empathy by straight up saying that even if he did meet his son, he has absolutely nothing to say to him. This man even goes as far as admitting that he regrets getting his lover pregnant. And when being confronted for abandoning them, he has the nerve to say that anyone else in his shoes would have done the same. This guy's lack of empathy is just remarkable, and I can clearly see where his son Melon gets it from. It's truly sad knowing that Melon honestly believed that since he never saw his dad, he believed that his dad was a victim while his mom was a culprit, when in reality, his mother was like this because she was so deeply in love with his father that she completely broke down when he abandoned her not long after their son was born. It's really messed up and ironic how even Yafia, someone who is completely against interspecies relationships, looks at him as though he is the most craziest person in the world. You know you messed up when Yafia looks at you with the "are you serious" face. So this is definitely a spot that he deserves to be on. Finally, at number 3, we have Mr. Kiryu from Kengen Ashira. He was the father of one of the main characters, Setsuna Kiryu. Now, this guy has not shown up at all in the anime, but he has shown in the manga. So why is he so high on this list? Well, just like Mary, who had a child for a certain reason, he had a reason for why he had a son. This guy had some kind of illness that required organs for him to survive. Unfortunately, he didn't have a suitable donor. So what did he do? He paid a prostitute a vast amount of money to carry his child and raise that child to basically be a donor baby. The plan was to wait for that child to reach the right age so that when the time came, his organs would be harvested for him in order to save this man's life. Now, Kiryu's life was a real living hell. His mother made it very clear to him that she didn't want him and thought of him as a huge burden that she clearly regretted having. Now, throughout his life, the world had never really been kind to him. When the time finally came for his organs to be harvested, he was saved by someone that he viewed as his god. He became obsessed with this person. Anyone who's seen the show will know exactly who I'm talking about. And he actually went into child prostitution in order to get connections. He eventually would find his father and brutally torture and kill him, and then use the money and resources he had in order to find that person once again. The real irony of this story is that this man had a child so that that child could be used to save him from an illness that he was clearly dying from. Instead, that child ended up ending his life a lot sooner than expected. Number 2, Yuzuru Kikuhara from Devil Line. She was the mother of Kiryu. Now, when it comes down to it, I was always under the impression that you have children for the joys of it, and you shouldn't have kids if you don't want them. However, this woman is quite an interesting case. Yuzuru absolutely despised children, and yet for some reason, rather than giving her son up for adoption after she had him, she decides to keep him and hire servants to take care of him. Throughout his entire childhood, she never once attempted to be close to him or interact with him at all, even seeing him as an eyesore. Now, why is she at number 2? Well, this is mainly due to the fact that she didn't start paying attention to her son until he was reaching his teens. It was here that she started to become sexually attracted to her own son and began acting upon that attraction. Now, I'm not exactly sure how long this had gone on, but it is implied that it only happened at least 2 to 3 times. And eventually, her son would be so deeply upset and damaged by this that he would eventually end up shoving her off the balcony after an encounter, causing her to break her neck on the fall. It truly fascinates me how she didn't see anything wrong with her actions, and it's even more disturbing knowing that she completely ignored her son and only wanted to be a part of his life simply because she was attracted to him, which is the push that leads to him deciding that enough is enough, and so he kills her. She pretty much deserved it, though. And now finally, for our number one spot, it is Matajuro from Requiem of Darkness. And like I said before, this one is actually the worst one, so you don't need to listen to it. Just if you don't feel comfortable, go ahead and leave. He was the father of Oyoshi and Otama. They're from the episode Dancing Heads. Now, when it comes to it, when he was first introduced, we're led to believe that he's just some bandit who's after Oyoshi, and then it's eventually revealed that he's her father. It's here that we learn that Matajuro had incestuous feelings towards Oyoshi once she began to grow into a woman. And eventually he would begin to act upon those desires towards her, which was something she tried to hide. He would begin to commit crimes for her and would eventually go on to murder his wife after she asked him to do it. Personally, I believe that the reason why she did this was because she wanted him to be a criminal so that she could flee from him, with the intent of taking her little sister with her. Unfortunately, because of his actions towards Oyoshi, he doesn't know that Otama actually witnessed it, which leads to Oyoshi killing her sister from the shame of being watched like that. It's real disturbing knowing that this man is in love with his own daughter and doesn't see anything wrong with it, even going as far as to murder more people and then kidnap the corpse of his youngest daughter to lure her to him. The saddest part about this is that when she confronts him, he forces her to come to terms with the fact that her sister is dead and that she was the one that had killed her. This completely breaks Oyoshi so badly that when he's finally killed, she's convinced that both his head, her sister's head, and the head of another man are spinning around her, hence the word dancing heads. It's so sad knowing that at the end of the day, her father screwed her up so badly that the main character begs one of his supernatural friends to give her peace by killing her off screen. He screwed up his daughter so badly that at the end of the day, death was better for her than being kept alive to suffer even further. She truly is a tragic character, and it's so sad knowing that it's her father who is responsible for her being this way in the first place. And so this is the end of Worst Anime Parents Part 2. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you guys would like to, please make some suggestions, and maybe, just maybe, I might be able to do them.